And we are back. What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Cody and Derek here again, guys. Back for another one. And guys, today we're going to talk about some players who might be categorized as forgotten. So these would be, here's a couple different factors here that will play into this list. So some players who maybe a lot of people aren't expecting to contribute to the Colts roster here in 2023, or players that we think simply like people aren't talking about enough. Maybe it's just other players are getting more highlighted. We want to talk about these players we think they're going to factor in, and maybe we're not talking about them enough. So with that being said, we'll get into it here in just a moment. But before we do that, just want to remind you guys this episode is presented by PrizePicks. Be sure to hop over to prizepicks.com or to their mobile app today. And when you sign up, use the code BTJ for a $100 deposit match. All right. Now, Derek, let's jump right into this. So, guys, for this list, we have three players on the offensive side of things. We have three players on the defensive side of things. So 6 players in total. If you can do math, congratulations. 6 players in total. So with that being said, Derek, let's hop right into the offensive side of things. And this guy we're going to start with, I think, is more of a player that not necessarily forgotten, but maybe isn't talked about quite enough. And it was a player that you were pretty adamant about us including on this list. That is Josh Downs, the wide receiver for the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, Derek, I feel like quietly Josh Downs had a great season last year for the Indianapolis Colts. You know, like obviously we talked about Michael Pittman having a career year. You talked about just some of the other things, but it just felt like Josh Downs quietly just was so consistent for Indianapolis and made some clutch plays for them. And obviously we know broke the franchise record in terms of receptions last year and just was an all-around great player for the Colts when they actually went to him and looked towards him in the passing game. But now, Derek, we talk about Adonai Mitchell. Obviously, the focus has been on him and Michael Pittman, who signed that extension. But I don't think we talk about Josh Downs probably as much as we need to. We kind of say, yeah, Josh Downs is a slot guy. We kind of move on and talk about the potential of a guy like Adonai Mitchell. And obviously, all eyes are going to be on him and Alec Pierce kind of battling it out for wide receiver 2 on the outside. But when it comes to Josh Downs, I mean, Derek, it's kind of crazy that we just kind of like say, yeah, Josh Downs, he's a good player, but we don't really like fully give him, I think, the flowers that he deserves for last year and how well he played, given the circumstances, given the fact that he played with a rookie quarterback and then also played with a backup quarterback for a good chunk of the season, yet still came out there and performed. And now that he's getting, his quarterback back, who we saw them have that chemistry early on in the season, I think it's a great thing, Derek, and you're really excited about Josh Downs and his potential here in year number 2 as that slot guy for Indy.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to put him on this list just because, it's not like he's completely forgotten about amongst the fan base, but, again, the topics have all been about Michael Pittman and his new contract and about Adonai Mitchell and his battle with Alec Pierce for wide receiver 2 on the outside. Nobody's really talking about Josh Downs. And of course, I mean, everyone should be talking about Josh Downs because what he did last year as a rookie and in an unfavorable situation with Gardner Minshew and everything going on. I mean, Josh Downs had some phenomenal plays. And I can only imagine what him doing in year 2 under Shane Steichen is going to look like. I mean, I can only imagine. And we saw some great plays. Some of Anthony Richardson's best throws were to Josh Downs at that beginning part of the year, man. I mean, we talk about that seamless bullet throw across the middle against the Rams, that 50-yard casual deep bomb to Josh Downs in the early part of the Tennessee game. I mean, those are just some of the highlights that Josh Downs had in year 1, and that was with Anthony Richardson. So I can only imagine what Josh Downs can do this year if Anthony Richardson remains healthy, what Josh Downs will be capable of doing this year, and obviously having another year to be able to learn in the system, get stronger, get faster, all of those different things, and get a whole year wiser. And I mean, I'm super excited to see what Josh Downs is doing because nobody's talking about him right now, but he definitely can turn some heads this year.
Oh, no doubt. Absolutely. I do believe that Josh Downs has that capability. Honestly, Derek, I think, and obviously it's going to be hard with feeding all the mouths for the Colts, but I do think Josh Downs has that capability to even take it up in terms of his stats. I think he could be an 1,000-yard guy. Like, I do think he has that in him to be that here in year number 2, growing with Anthony Richardson as he's going to. Now, moving on to another guy, and this guy's going to be more in the line of forgotten, although I feel like we've tried to hype it up a little bit more, and that is Jelani Woods. And Jelani Woods for the Indianapolis Colts didn't play last year. He had obviously his share of just injuries upon injuries when it came to his hamstrings. It was just a very unfortunate thing for Jelani Woods last year. Definitely a big bummer for him. But now, Derek, he comes into 2024 fully healthy and looking pretty good from what we've seen. And I think sometimes it can be easy to kind of forget about a player like Jelani Woods. But when you look back, especially his rookie season, when he was on the field, I mean, we saw that every time you threw him the football, good things happened. I mean, absolutely good things happened. I mean, you point to that Kansas City game, you point to the Pittsburgh game. Like, Jelani Woods was taking over those games. And obviously we know the size, 6'7", 265. So he's a big, big guy, but he's also got that 10 athletic score. So he's big, but he's also athletic as well, which definitely serves him well. And he hasn't ever had the chance to be in Shane Steichen's system. So, and also to play with an actual competent quarterback either. So a lot of things there when it comes to Jelani Woods. But talk to me about him and just the potential for him being kind of a player that's been kind of forgotten by a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Jelani Woods has gotten lost in the totality of everything. I mean, people are talking about, we mentioned this entire offseason about the Indianapolis Colts maybe getting a tight end in Brock Bowers in the first round of the draft. And I didn't say that in the defense of Jelani Woods should be thought of as an afterthought. I thought what you could do with Brock Bowers and Jelani Woods on the field at the same time could be something that could be very special. But again, like you said, when it comes to the national media, they don't know about Jelani Woods. They don't know anything about him. They don't know that he's part of this team. They don't know that this dude's a 6'7", 265-pound monster that can run a 4.6 40 time and has the ability to just do special things when on the field. In the 2022 season, when the Colts offense was one of the worst in franchise history, Jelani Woods was one of the few bright spots of that team. And of course, a lot of people forget about him because he missed the whole year with that, obviously, those hamstring injuries that he was dealing with. Looks to be coming back fully healthy this time around. And, people are talking about all these graphics with these great athletic players that the Indianapolis Colts have on their offense. Jelani Woods' name doesn't get brought up most of the time. And one could argue he might be one of the most athletic guys out there on the field when it comes to the Indianapolis Colts. So Jelani Woods, man, love to see him come back healthy. If he is healthy and if he's even 80% of what he was before those hamstring injuries, again, that guy is going to be special in this offense for sure.
Yeah, but no, absolutely, man. I definitely agree with you. I think Jelani Woods, all the potential in the world to be a great player. And I think if he's just healthy, I think he's going to get to that point. I mean, it's not the fact that he was just super athletic, but he's also, like you mentioned, he was productive. He was productive in 2022 when he was actually targeted. So I think if now with Shane Steichen, Anthony Richardson, and also just other weapons as well, I think that's going to open the door for more opportunities for Jelani Woods. So definitely excited to see him in this offense fully healthy this year. I think a lot of people are sleeping on Jelani and definitely don't want to be a part of that crowd that is doing that. So he's one guy for sure. Another guy, Derek, that we haven't really talked about a whole lot, but I think he might factor in more than we're thinking. How about Evan Hall? I mean, Evan Hall was the draft pick last year for the Colts, later day 3 type of guy. Had a lot of run, especially because of the Jonathan Taylor stuff, the Zach Moss injury. We saw him a lot in the preseason. Now, he wasn't great in the preseason, but Derek, now you look at this Indianapolis Colts current running back depth chart. Outside of Jonathan Taylor, I mean, you got Trey Sermon, you got Tyler Goodson, and you have Evan Hall, and that's about it, right? And so while I do think it'll be the kind of a competition more so with Trey Sermon and him, I do think he has an opportunity here, Derek, to factor in a little bit more. I mean, this is a dude that caught a ton of passes at Northwestern. I mean, a dude that just absolutely, he had over 200 yards receiving in the game. Like, so he knows his way around catching the football out of the backfield as a runner. So definitely going to be interested to see kind of where does he factor in. Is he RB2? Is he RB3? What's it look like for him? But a guy that unfortunately his season last year got cut short due to injuries. But talk to me about Evan Hall here.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a very interesting player here because, like you said, this guy was supposed to have, he's supposed to have a relatively good role in this backfield and just never got the chance due to that injury. And, this is the year you don't really have much of a backup running back situation right now. If you're Indy, it's wide open right now. And for Evan Hall, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities to come back this year and provide some great minutes for the Indianapolis Colts behind Jonathan Taylor. Would love to see what they bring up with him this year. And you're right. Everyone talks about Jonathan Taylor. Nobody's talking about the backups. No one talks about the backup running back. So, Evan Hall, this perfect opportunity for you to go out there and do something and make a name for yourself. As we said, guys, today's episode is sponsored by PrizePicks. Now, what is PrizePicks? PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling against thousands of other players across platforms, you're basically picking 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're choosing more or less on those stat projections to be able to watch those winnings roll in. It's very easy. Do you guys want to play along at some of PrizePicks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and UFC fighter Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, if you guys sign up today, you can find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view the entries of some of the biggest names on the platform and be a part of that as well. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 just like that with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Like a lot of other things, guys, they also offer injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So if someone exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays live. So it's great bounce back for that one. What I love about the app as well, guys, is it's not just sports like NBA, NHL, football, and tennis, and baseball, and all these other things, but there's also a lot of others that go into it as well. If you like to place entries on video game situations like Call of Duty, CS2, Apex, if that's something that appeals to you, there's a wide variety of sports and video games and everything else that you can place entries on. And I love how expansive it is. Even just looking at the NBA, there's entries you can make with turnovers, with points. You can do combo deals, dunks, field goals attempted, all of these different things. So there's just so many different ways to make money off of these entries. Be sure to download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, it's sponsored by PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
Speaking of backups, I think there's 2 backup guys on the defensive line that we're not talking about enough, Derek. The first guy I got to talk about, a player the Colts signed in free agency from Miami, Raekwon Davis, a name we haven't really talked about at all, Derek. Raekwon Davis, he's a massive human being. We already mentioned 6 foot, 6'6", like over 300 pounds. So he is definitely just a massive guy. He might be 6'7", actually. Either way, he's giant. He's a giant human being. He might be the biggest player on this Colts roster, and that's saying something. Like, he's right up there with any of those guys. So when it comes to Raekwon, though, he's not going to be a starter. I think we're pretty comfortable to say that. I don't think he's going to be one of those starters on the defensive line. But, Derek, this was secretly, I think, a big weakness of the Colts last year that I think they quietly addressed in free agency that we maybe didn't talk about a whole lot except for when he did get signed. I think Raekwon Davis is going to have a pretty big role with this team in terms of, especially when it comes to the running game, because we saw last year with Grover Stewart having to be suspended and the Colts kind of trying to have to figure it out, piece it together. It wasn't pretty. I mean, it was very obvious how valuable a guy like Grover Stewart was last year for the Colts. And while I'll still think he's extremely valuable to what the Colts do, especially when it comes to stopping the run, I do think Raekwon Davis is going to provide some quality minutes and give Grover a little bit more rest because, let's be honest, Grover's 30 plus now. So like he's getting a little bit up there in age. So it wouldn't be any harm in not making him be on the field all the time when it comes to rundown. So I definitely think that's something that the Colts are going to do well. And obviously we know they like to play in waves on their defensive line. I think Raekwon Davis is going to put in some solid minutes. And obviously he's a massive guy in the middle. And so I think he's going to be a very valuable piece to this Colts defensive line because they have a ton of guys that can play, more defensive end or 3-tech. But Raekwon Davis, outside of Grover Stewart, he's the only other true 1-tech guy that I think actually can play at a very high level. So what are your thoughts on Raekwon Davis here for the Indianapolis Colts, the defensive lineman they signed in free agency?
Yeah, you're not wrong there. When we're talking about all these defensive linemen that the Indianapolis Colts have gotten throughout the period of this offseason, Raekwon Davis was the first guy, and everyone is talking about Latu and some of these other guys that got re-signed, but you're right. Raekwon Davis definitely is the guy that's going to provide a lot of that depth for you and, is a lot like a Grover Stewart clone. So it will be definitely interesting to see how he handles his role with the Indianapolis Colts and what he can provide, and you're right. But he is definitely a guy that has been getting, just overlooked and, for a reason, obviously, but, being that backup, it'll be fun to see what he does in replacement of Grover Stewart at times. But yeah, you're right. He definitely is a guy that a lot of people are not talking about right now.
Yeah, and then moving over to the other defensive lineman the Colts have that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. And when we talked off air, Derek, I said, this is the guy that I immediately thought of when talking about forgotten players. And that's Adetomiwa Adebawari. We haven't talked about him at all, Derek, but a guy that was a 4th-round pick last year, so decent draft capital that you invested in this guy. We already know he's an extreme athlete. He's over a 9 RAS, score a high 9, if I remember correctly. I think the only reason he wasn't a complete 10 or close to it was I think he's a little bit undersized. He's only 6'2", 280. So, I mean, he's a little bit undersized, but Derek, he is a mega athlete. And I really think he has an opportunity to kind of potentially carve out a role here with the Indianapolis Colts. And where's that going to be? I'm not entirely sure. But I mean, Derek, this guy's only 23 years old. And again, he didn't play a whole lot last year. He only played in 10 games. He only logged, not that many snaps last year for the Indianapolis Colts. And so when you look at it, I mean, yeah, he only logged when it comes to it 132 snaps last year. So he was barely on the field for the Colts. But when they kind of had that thing with Grover Stewart, it was interesting, Derek, because they got it anytime on the field a little bit more. And I thought you started to see him kind of show up a little bit. Now, unfortunately, when Grover came back, he kind of got pushed down the depth chart a little bit. But I mean, Derek, a super athletic guy that, decent round pick. So I think the Colts still really believe in him. That has all the potential in the world to be a really good player for the Colts. We're not really talking about him because you talk about Latu, you talk about all these other defensive linemen. But could Tommy potentially factor in more than people are thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely will be interesting. He was a fan favorite last draft class when a lot of people were talking about the potential of this guy, or wondering what kind of things he would get himself into. And, you're right. We haven't really talked about him much recently. And I would love to see what we can come up with when it comes to that. So it will definitely be interesting. Is he going to not just be a special teams guy this next year? Is he going to get any kind of reps with the defensive linemen, things like that? And, for as deep as this defensive line group is right now, it will be interesting to see what kind of reps he actually does get. But you're right. He's not getting talked about a lot. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And then the final guy we have here, I think just by nature of where the position is right now, and also I think he played some good snaps for you last year, Dallas Flowers. Now, Chris Ballard's probably a lot higher on Dallas Flowers than a lot of people are. But Derek, I mean, this is a guy that, I mean, essentially last year was what, year 2 for him when it comes to being in the NFL. I know he's a little bit older, but I mean, it was year 2 for him. He played a little bit in his rookie season for Indianapolis. And last year, he actually took a step up when it came to playing his corner. So now you ask the question, obviously the injury is the biggest question, but you ask the other question, like, is there more in the tank here for Dallas Flowers? Because he played some good snaps for you last year, and he can stay healthy and be on the field. Could he potentially be a starter out there for you? So talk to me about Dallas Flowers.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas Flowers, you know, when we look at this cornerback room and just mainly this secondary in general, man, because when we've been talking about this secondary group the whole time, right? We've been talking about Juju Brents. We've been talking about Jalen Jones. We've been talking about the safeties and how they need help. And even the cornerback room needs help. We've been talking about Kenny Moore's extension. We haven't really been talking as much about Dallas Flowers and what he could potentially become. Like I've mentioned several times to a bunch of people, Dallas Flowers was playing good football at corner before he went out with his injury. And I'm telling you, I have confidence in Dallas Flowers to figure it out, regardless of whether or not Indianapolis actually goes and gets more corner help or secondary help. Dallas Flowers, I still think, has that ability to be that number 2 outside corner for you going forward. And nobody's talking about him. I don't know whether it's just disrespect. I don't know if it's just lack of knowledge or just wanting to see somebody else there. But we got to remember Dallas Flowers. And he's out there. He's balling. He's trying to work hard to get himself back. And I think he's going to surprise people this year.
Absolutely. So, guys, let us know your thoughts here on some forgotten players that maybe might factor in a little bit more for the Indianapolis Colts this coming season. Let us know all those things in the comments down below. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.